Hey, Tim, welcome to the Virtual CMO podcast. I'm very glad you could join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I'm very interested to hear a little bit more about your background and what you're doing today. So, maybe to kick things off, just for the benefit of our listeners here, tell people a little bit about your background and how you got to Hatch.
Yeah, I can probably start from the very beginning. I'll try not to bore you all with the details, but going way back, I actually don't have a formal background in marketing, but I actually was at one point in my life doing bankruptcy consulting out of a firm in Los Angeles. Pretty much had decided that I wanted to do a little bit more than kind of interfacing with legal clients all day, and actually took up freelance writing as a copywriter
Okay.
as my first step into marketing. So
Yep.
from there, kind of leapfrogged my way through press communications, made my way into kind of more growth marketing tactics for lead generation and conversion, and then eventually it led me to my very first startup with in the Bay Area with the CEO of Hatch, Thompson Nguyen. It was his very first company that he was actually looking to build coming out of Y Combinator. Jumped on as actually their head of growth and marketing. We were acquired by Square.
Okay.
And then eventually I actually spent a solid amount of time working alongside Thompson and team over at the Square Capital product. About 3.5, 4 years in, decided that startups were really where my heart was, even though I enjoyed my time over there. And just by chance, Thompson was actually starting his second company by then, which was Hatch. So it kind of just all came full circle, and I'm actually now leading the growth marketing function for the team. Mhm.
Very interesting. Square has had quite a run, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those very tough decision for me to actually make the jump from that team over to Hatch, but the opportunity that we have in front of my current team here was just too good of a chance to pass up. So it also just allowed me to really get my just roll up my sleeves again and get used to building things from scratch, which I really love to do.
Well, one of the reasons that I'm excited to have you on the show today is that you're a growth marketing guy and you're also competing in a pretty crowded space. And I think that that's very typical of a lot of the listeners that we have on this show.
Mhm.
We talk and have talked with many of our other guests about the fact that there aren't too many truly revolutionary products out there, right? Most products are incremental improvements over something that is in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And as I understand Hatch, you guys are a financial services firm that is targeting small and medium businesses with some financial products. But as
Mhm.
we look down the street, there's a bank on every corner. So as the growth marketing guy, how do you really look at defining your target market so that you can ultimately be successful with your marketing efforts?
Yeah, I think like for me, it's really interesting kind of challenge, especially since it is such a crowded market. I think we don't like to refer to ourselves as a neobank, but that's just the term that generally gets used for banking services that are built on top of banking platforms and APIs and such. So yeah, to plus one your point, it's a super crowded space. I think the way that I've been approaching how we are actually acquiring users at Hatch and trying to find our target market is actually just really working on the basics. So we actually do a good amount of just paid advertising with Google, Facebook, just kind of testing like the tried and true methods for being able to acquire users, get in front of eyeballs. And then from there is actually when you start to think a little bit more creatively. So once you actually get all your fundamentals in place, you're attracting users, you can see what exactly your CPAs and your overall CAC is for acquiring these folks. Then you can start to be more creative about like how can we utilize our products, how can we use referral systems, how can we actually leverage one work stream that we're actually working on right now is actually reaching out to small business blogs and essentially like influencers. So we're the more customers that we have on board, the more interviews that we have with them and get to know who they are. And these are actually micro merchants, people who are just starting their entrepreneurial journey. It gets our wheels turning on like, where exactly do these people, read? Like, where are they getting their advice? Where exactly are they looking to, get, just more information on how to start their businesses? And then it actually, kind of comes up organically, and okay, well, these are a couple channels that we want to start testing. And I think what the really fun thing about marketing and growth marketing is in general is that you kind of go into these new work streams and explorations with the expectation that not everything is going to work.
Sure.
So instead, it's like you focus on the things that do end up working, because you have to just scope it out, put a little bit of time into it, set some budget aside, and then just look at what your overall returns are going to be. So if I had to hopefully that wasn't too much, but just to sum it up, it's you kind of focus on the basics first, and then from there you are able to think more creatively on how to find new channels that could work for you.
Well, you mentioned a couple things there that I think are interesting. First of all, as a new company, right, you have to focus on brand awareness. You have to make people aware that you're out there in the marketplace and what services you offer. You talked a little bit about the potential of using influencers or people in the marketplace to help get your brand out there. And then talking about partnerships. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I looked at your website, is you seem to be tying your products to value-added offers that seem to make a lot of sense for small businesses. I see a lot of companies out there that offer things, but they don't necessarily have that much applicability. And it seems like you're very targeted in the kinds of offers that you're tying to something like a credit card, for example. Yeah,
exactly. So I think, and you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier, like because we operate in such a crowded space, there are certain points where financial services feels very commodified.
Sure.
It's always just like, who can help you save the most fees? Like, who's the one that's, offering no monthly minimums, and everybody essentially has, like in-network ATMs for free. Like, these are just like table stakes features. So I think for us, we had to really, again, apply the feedback that we were getting about our customers, really, just, again, do the basics, like get on interviews with our customers and like ask them exactly what it is they're looking for, just get to know them and what their struggles are. And that's actually how we, what you're referencing is actually our Hatch Perks program.
Yep.
So in addition to the banking and then the, credit services that we offer, our next move was like, okay, well, how do we actually make our product even more enticing for small business owners? Like, if we look pretty similar and have like the same amount of reliability as another service, are there things that we can do to set us apart? And the first thing we were like, okay, well, if we're like really targeting folks who are brand new to businesses, brand new to building their businesses, they're probably not going to have a lot of access to discounts and tools. So if we can leverage our brand and leverage our ability to just like strike up partnerships and get discounts for customers, off of like business software and advertising services and HR software, accounting software, like that just kind of helps them in general. And I think for us, it actually just opens a lot of doors to, again, kind of just like starting that conversation with some of these perks partners that we have, and thinking a little bit more strategic about like partnerships down the road, whether it's distribution, whether it's like growing our perks with them. Like that's kind of how we've seen it. So
when the business started, did you have a very specific customer target in mind? Had you built out that avatar and really understood what they were? Or did you start a little more broadly and experiment to see really which segment of the market gravitated towards your offering?
Yeah, I think for us, I can't take credit for this one actually. So I'll kind of speak about our CEO and his journey a little bit. I know this is an interview with me, but I would like to think we're on the same page and we're pretty aligned on this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have jumped on board. For us, I think we both worked at Square, and it was obviously nothing but good things to say about it. Super mission-driven company as well, helping small businesses, very similar in scope. But what we actually had found in working there was that there was actually a whole sector of micro merchants and even earlier businesses where, when you think about Square, you actually think about, the farmer's market seller who's like, oh, I need to take a credit card payment really quickly. You have like the reader, like that's kind of how they started. But at this point, it's such a huge financial services company, and a lot of their target market actually has kind of gone up market with their primary POS product. So they're actually working with more like entrenched and established small businesses that have brick and mortar stores. And during his time and our time there, we were really focused on kind of serving those those customers and figure out how to go even more upmarket. So I think from his experience there, he actually had found that, maybe there's actually other services that we can provide for folks who are really, really just getting started. Like maybe they don't even need to know about how to take a credit card payment yet, because they just simply need a bank account to run their business and separate their personal finances. So I think for us, it started off with that need. He had a thesis on how he wanted to develop that, and then essentially just built the first prototype of our business line of credit product, which is just, can we actually, essentially just like, have somebody come through like an application process, review them, and go through an underwriting process to determine if they qualify for a line of credit without using like hard credit scores or FICO scores. And that's essentially what he built. And so that initial archetype of just like the the business owner who's, again, just getting started, limited credit, or maybe they've made some mistakes in the past and they're kind of just recovering from that, but they have like a pretty cash rich business and they just need kind of like a second chance, a second lease on starting something new. That's essentially how he determined it. So I guess organic in a way, but I think it also ties into a lot of his own personal experience and what he worked with on previous products. So
we talk so much on this podcast about creating content of value, really things that people can read or view, or something that will help them along their journey, whatever that journey may be. And it sounds like, especially for a company like yours that's targeting these smaller micro businesses, there's probably a fair amount of education that needs to go along with that process, right? Because maybe people don't know how to effectively use their money within a business. How important is that kind of educational content to you in terms of your overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think in general, very important. Like if you actually go to our Instagram, it's actually, one of our more curated, social media channels. And interspersed with our content, we actually have a lot to do with small business advice. So we actually host a blog as well, where we actually, have our writers write about, things that are going to be very topical for small business owners. So we kind of get into the nitty gritty with like, what's the difference between a sole proprietorship versus an LLC, LLC versus S Corp and C Corp, like a little bit more of the, I guess, like small business technical content. But then aside from that, we always think about like, okay, how can one piece of long form content just get stretched? And it's like a 1,500 word blog post can also be potentially like a series of social media posts that can be consumed in a more bite-sized fashion. From there, we actually have a couple of other things that actually tie in our customers as well. So we actually launched our own podcast series called the Small Business Spotlights, where we literally just grab folks who are in our customer base. We ask them if they're willing to spend 30 minutes with us on a quick phone call, not unlike what we have here. And then they pretty much just tell us like, how did you get started? How, what were some challenges that you faced? What are some moments that you just made it feel like it was all worth it? And I think this aspect of actually allowing our customers to tell their stories is probably actually more resonating with people than just us writing like more informational blog posts and things like that. Like those are all things that we know that we have to do and we have to deliver to our customers on an ongoing basis. But what I'm really excited about is actually letting our customers tell the stories, because they get really nitty gritty. Like they start talking about just there's someone I have in mind. They have like a notary service, and she had like a full-time job, and she actually built up her notary service because she needed it for her own personal kind of things she had going on, and she just couldn't find somebody who could come to her and notarize documents for her. So she essentially said, why not start my own thing? Took some classes and has built it up to be her actual full-time job. So she has like little stories about like, yeah, you just have to, I think she said she took her first notary gig, not the right term for it, but like a notary job, like out of somebody's car. I think it was like during COVID. So somebody had to like pull up and they were masked up, and she notarized her documents for them. And I think those are actually going to be like the more inspirational stories that I am more excited to actually tell from our own customers, because just small businesses or small business owners, they're generally going to go into what they're doing and have like a general guideline on like what they need to do to get started. But it's like, I think from these like actual personal experiences where we can kind of learn from each other. So, to answer your question, yeah, I think content's super important. And then we're always thinking about like different ways that we can deliver that content, and hopefully through the eyes of our customers as well. So,
well, I like that a lot because I think that there are a lot of brands out there that tout community or we're all part of a family.
yeah.
No, you're not. You're not.
Yeah,
I'm not in a family with this company. That's just not the case. But I do think that there's a lot of value in sharing the stories of other customers and the experiences they have. That's one of the reasons we do this podcast is we share stories from other businesses and marketing professionals so that people can pick up things along the way and maybe save themselves some trouble of having to go through the pain of something by mistake. So there's a lot of value, I think, in sharing those stories. So I think that's great what you're doing. And I can see where that would be of value to potential customers.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you mentioned you do some paid advertising across different channels. Explain a little bit about how you do experimentation there. How do you find the messages that really resonate with that ideal customer?
Yeah, so I think I actually spent a lot of time. Well, let me kind of take a couple quick steps back.
Yep.
We have a lot of different touch points with our customers across the organization. I think it's like pretty typical and quite common for, I think, like depending on what function that you operate in a company. I think usually if it's like super technical, like engineering or more administrative or operational, you don't really get a lot of exposure to who your customers are. And I think at startups, you can't help but know about your customers. You're hearing about it all the time, whether you're an engineer, whether you're an intern, like it just happens all the time. And that's actually something that I knew that I missed kind of going into a larger company. Square did a great job and has always done a good job of telling their customer stories, always across the board. So we actually wanted to kind of apply that level of rigor and just consistency and frequency of just like talking about our customers all the time. So stage set, that being said, we actually have a lot of just processes in place where, the CS team will actually, have some sessions with our product team, and it's like all, open invite. Anybody can kind of pop in for these kind of like, here's what our customers and the voice of the customer are saying. And so for me, I actually spent a lot of time just thinking about and reading a lot through product review or product interviews, transcripts. I actually set aside some time each week to actually just follow along with our customer support team to like just determine like what are people asking for. And aside from bugs and that sort of thing, I do my best to just kind of like think about the language that they're using. It gets to the point where I'll use tools like building word clouds just to see like keywords that people are trying to pick up, and then we essentially take that and then we apply it to through the lens of like SEO, and then just we're thinking about like copy changes or writing new emails. We just try to use a lot of the words that our customers are utilizing. So they might not call themselves, SMBs and small business owners like we imagine them to, like in our perfect little like customer persona. They call themselves other things like, like I'm the boss of my own business, I'm the owner, like things like that. And so essentially just like, utilizing like their words as much as possible to be able to communicate back to them is like super important to me. And you kind of got to balance, like, I think there's a lot of different ways to kind of slice and dice, especially when you're thinking about like product copy or, like website copy, and you can go like the ultra SEO search engine optimization route. And sometimes these landing pages are kind of like, I don't want to say, but like kind of devoid of emotion, because it's just like, it's purely by data. It's like, what are people searching for? And so I think, what we like to do is kind of apply a mixture of both. It's like, what exactly are customers saying? And then, kind of, run it through the I guess like the process to see how we can make it, go as far as possible. So
when you have so many competitors in the space who are trying to, show up in those organic search results, who are out there, buying ads on Facebook or Instagram or buying keywords on Google, it's hard to compete, right? A lot of the things that you're probably going after are what a lot of, even some of the top financial institutions in the country are going after, which drives up the prices. So how do you find that area, that space where you can effectively compete against those guys and not blow your whole budget on a single campaign?
Yeah, I mean, first off is we definitely, try to do our best to stay away from the high volume searches because we're just going to get blown out of the water,
Yeah.
when our competitors are, like more traditional, like lending and financial institutions, and they have, billions of dollars to throw around. It's really hard to do that. I think one way that we've been doing it in actually one thing that we're trying to scope out right now is actually to purchase more specific keywords that are very specific to these certain customer types. So again, going back to who your customer is, just making sure that you understand what industry they're in. Are they retail? Are they professional services? Are they food and beverage? And then essentially looking for keywords on things that they might be using there. So instead of saying something like business checking account for small business, which is going to be insane for us, like to just keep up, and we won't have the budget to keep up with it. We're going to be looking at small business checking account for a restaurant in like a localized area. So those are like little ways that we can kind of just like refine the keywords a little bit. They're not going to be bid on as much by some of the larger competitors. And then, it's just like combining, I think, like the customer personas and also adding some locality in is also one thing that we're looking at. So again, kind of going back to the data as well, we started with the basics. We kind of like set off some really broad match kind of campaigns to start. And then we actually naturally just saw within our Facebook and our Google data regionally where we actually had the most traction. So immediately we had no thoughts about this at all, but all of a sudden we had a bunch of folks out of Texas. And so, one of the things that we've just kind of gleaned from our data is that like, even without really, optimizing for it, somehow we, with our broad targeting, we actually ended up with a lot of businesses operating out of Texas. And so from there, we can take that and further refine our strategy, because then we can start to, do keyword search results off of like very specific cities in Texas, apply it to some of these, persona terms. And, it's essentially just going from like the broadest net you could possibly do into, just like a really focused spear that you're going to be very specific on. And generally, buying those kind of ads and keywords will be much cheaper for us.
Well, I love that, because you're looking for where you're getting traction and expanding upon that versus just stubbornly going after something that it may be very difficult to get traction on. So I think that's a fantastic strategy. I know too that you've got some VCs that are backing you. So you've got lots of people that are looking over your shoulders at what you do and the money that you're spending. So we all know marketing is a cost center. We like to spend money in marketing. So how do you manage that? Do you do most of it internally? Do you hire a lot of it out to agencies or freelancers or other people who can help you execute some of this strategy? How do you organize your marketing team?
Yeah. For us, we're a pretty young company still. So we've actually gone through the whole range. When I came on board about a year ago, we actually were working with an advertising agency. Eventually, we were just like, hey, we want to run a bunch of tests. We want to do a lot of experimentation. It's going to require a lot of additional operational work in terms of building landing pages, kind of rallying our content internally around it, making sure that like customer support is all looped in. And so there's a lot of like cross-functional work that we needed to do where an agency is just not really going to work out for us. It's kind of interesting, right? I think that, early stage startups, kind of depending on the nature of your business and really just like the skill set and like the overall composition, I think that, agencies can work to a certain extent. And it just kind of depends on, how your team is set up in the first place. But, I think one thing that, given that we're at that Series A mark, where, we're, kind of approaching the 50-person mark at this point, there's still a lot of work to go around among a very small group of people. So one thing that I've been doing is actually whenever I make a hire for my team, we actually just make sure that they have like a pretty broad skill set and they're like good in one area. So one of my favorite hires, he's just been an awesome person for running our paid ads. He kind of came in to help us actually build up our perks program, but he also had a lot of insight into how to build up like a paid ads structure. So, we essentially offboarded off of our agency just because at that point we had a really good fit in the team. So I think, the way that we've approached it is just, I think, again, it's just balancing what your headcount and your resources are. And then, agencies, I think I actually do love working with them because, when you work with them and you run them in a very limited scope, they can like really nail it on very specific tasks. And to me, like that actually does work pretty well, but again, it just kind of depends. But overall, that just gives a little bit more viability though for hiring out your own team members as the needs arise on it. So
it's great to have so many choices, right? So many different directions that you could go based on your needs. I'm curious too as to what marketing automation technology you use internally.
Yeah, so for us, just to describe our stack for a bit, we use Segment for all of our data instrumentation. And then in terms of marketing automation, we use SendGrid for emails. That actually powers all of our triggered email systems. Continually building out, so we're going to be incorporating push and SMS soon as well. We use Twilio actually for our SMS system for reaching out to our customers through SMS and text.
Oh my gosh, there's so many choices, right? When it comes to marketing automation, so many great tools out there, but your stack can get pretty complex quickly. Does your company have like an overall marketing automation platform, like a HubSpot or a Marketo, Pardot, anything like that?
No, not currently. I think like for where we've been at, the segment into the SendGrid implementation has actually been pretty good. We are looking at a couple of other tools as well to kind of shore up and kind of just like broaden out our ability to reach out to customers a little bit better. But to me, I don't know, like I really want to advocate for Segment just because I think in terms of data instrumentation and just being a hub for collecting data and sending it to different tools, like for startups who can afford their SaaS costs, it's just it's a no-brainer because it's so much easier than to be able to have to instrument like new events for every single tool that you want to test out. So it's one of those things where I think if we didn't have that implementation in place, I don't know where we would be at, like how many more engineers we'd have to throw at like setting up this system for us. So
do your VC partners, do they stand on the sidelines pretty much, or do they come in and make recommendations for things like what you should use in terms of marketing automation or recommend specific agencies or things like that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I've kind of seen it in a lot of different ways where I think for where we're at and then our Series A that we recently announced, I've been surprised to see how much on the sidelines our investors have been. I think the stance that they've taken with us, which has been really good and refreshing, is that they're actually there as more of a how would you say they get us the boost when we need it. So they kind of trust our judgment in terms of like which direction that we want to take the company in. So things like tools and platforms and channels, like generally they are pretty good at letting us trust our judgment and where to go. And then usually what we'll do is actually tap them on the shoulder if we need like an intro to something. So for example, this social influencer outreach campaign that we've been firing up, it's something that actually came up as a part of a few sort of conversations organically within the team. But then, now we're going to be trying to loop in our, investors to see if they can give us any sort of suggestions on tools, agencies, exactly like you say. But, I think that we've been very blessed to actually have like investors who are not super micromanaging with us. And, again, it ultimately comes down to trust between us and our founder, and just being able to trust the judgment of the tool, of the team that he's built up around the product. So.
No, that's great. It's nice to have that resource that's available to you, but also give you the freedom to sort of explore and do this on your own. And I think this influencer campaign is interesting. We certainly hear a lot about influencers, but I think many people get a misperception about what that could be, right? It's not the people that are flying all over in their fake jets. It's a lot of people out in the industry who have a following and can spread the word about good products and services that they believe in and trust.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for us is like, because our target market is small business owners, we actually are trying to stay away from people who are too flashy. And, it's just, for us, it's not like we're, not expecting to have meme videos and joke videos go super viral and, get a bunch of small business owners sign up for our product. Like that just doesn't have like a clear mismatch unless I'm missing something. Yep. I think for us, we're actually really focused on trying to recruit or reach out and recruit folks who are giving like helpful small business advice. Maybe they have a video, or a YouTube channel that actually, has like a few tens of thousands of followers, and they're just like focused on reviewing all, a bunch of credit and lending products. And so we're reaching out to them because it's like, hey, you already have an audience of people who, speak your language, like it's in line with what we're looking for, and you potentially have other small business owners who are listening to your channel. I would rather work with them than, have to try to negotiate like a 6-figure contract with somebody who will promise us like millions of impressions, but it's like, don't really know what your audience is. It's probably more leaning towards like the consumer side. It'd be a very different, conversation if, we had a consumer product, but, because we are so focused on that B2B, it's almost like a hybrid of B2B, B2C, because again, a lot of our customers are just starting out on their own journeys. But, again, it's fundamentally B2B. It's all about driving value and like giving, practical information rather than, just pure entertainment. So
I think that's great. As a guy who spent most of my career working with financial services firms, I think it's really interesting what you're doing and carving out this unique niche in the marketplace. So I think it's pretty exciting. As we wrap things up here today, I would love it if you could just share with people a little bit more about where they could find you personally on the web and where they can find more information about Hatch.
Yeah, definitely. So I think our website is hatchcard.com. So that's just going to be the easiest way to reach us. For us on the web, we have our social media profiles on our website as well. But generally speaking, I think if you want to learn more about our product and our team, it's pretty much all there on the website.
That's excellent. It's a nice looking website too. So I thought there was a lot of really useful information on there. So definitely encourage people to check that out. And I will make sure that we link all that stuff up in the show notes. Tim, this has been fun. I've really enjoyed having you on the show, hearing a little bit more about your business and some of the things that you're doing to really grow the business. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Really appreciate your questions and the time. Really hoping that this is going to be valuable, and some of the insights that I've shared was going to be valuable for your audience too. So,
absolutely. Thank you again for your time today.
Great, thank you.